say, who's responsible for remembering that?
Look, it's recording now. We're all good.
So let me go get the link, Ellen, and I will resend that to you.
Although it says recording paused on my end. Ellen, did you hit record?
I think she did. Somebody started.
Okay.
Yes, I did.
Okay, it's just that it says recording paused on my screen. That's all. So I want to make sure we really are recording.
Yes. So if you need to pause, I guess that's what it's.
No, I don't want to pause it. Okay, we're going to start admitting, Madam President. Is that cool?
Okay.
Okay.
I got to go get the link again, so just I'll be doing that. Okay. Hello, everybody. Nice to see you this evening. As you know, if you've been here before, we will start promptly at 7 o'clock. So we'll allow people to continue to come in, and we are excited about our guest speaker tonight. So hold on to your hats. You're in for a wonderful presentation.
Oh, wait, I gotta change this. EK background.
We're almost at time. PRP Reeves, you see the information you requested? Okay, great. All right. Okay, counting down here. All right, it is 7 o'clock on the dot. So good evening, everybody. My name is Pamela Allen. I'm a registered parliamentarian, and I'm privileged to be the president of the Parliamentarians of Bucks County. Those of you who are members of PBC, put your name in the chat, rep your unit. I want to say to everybody else, on behalf of the members of the Parliamentarians of Bucks County, we're glad to have you with us this evening. We are totally committed to educational development in our parliamentary skills. And so we are always excited to have individuals from other units and members at large come on that journey with us. So I think as RP Ferrier already put in the chat, please put your name and your email address in the chat so we have a record that you are here. If you are a credentialed member, please note that so that we can make sure that you get your certificate for the 1 hour of participation that you'll have with us tonight. I mentioned an hour, but it's not going to be a solid hour of us talking at you. This is going to be a very interactive session. I know I've been kind of bubbling all over the place about how excited I am about tonight's presentation. And I know PRP Stratton is probably like, you are really raising the bar here. Now he has to live up to it. But I'm so excited about his presentation tonight. We will be taking questions at the end. So what we're going to ask you to do is please put your questions in the chat as he's going through his presentation. We want to make sure that we get through the entire presentation. And so, you know, our learning opportunities are only an hour. So that's the shorter session. And I know he has the longer version of this as well. And so we just want to make sure that he can get through his content and that we capture your questions. And then we will have a facilitated question and answer period once he's done with his prepared remarks. So I do see, speaking of repping units, that we do have some officers from other units. I'm going to ask, I see Theljua Garrett, who is the president of the Parliamentarians of Pennsylvania. I'm not sure if President Garrett is able to come on camera. I'm putting her on the spot a little bit.
After I've had no sleep for like 3 straight days, and you know that, so right.
Good evening. How are you? Good evening, everyone. It's good to see you. I too am looking forward to your presentation, Adrian. And I just want to hear something other than my whole stuff what's been going on the last couple of days. But every opportunity I have, I try to, visit the units and certainly be a part of your presentations. And parliamentarians of Bucks County and the state of Pennsylvania, you guys continue to raise the bar. And I certainly use you as an example to the others to continue to strive to do that work. So, and of course, if everybody was up at 1 o'clock this morning, you saw what we were doing, right? Is getting and preparing the information for the PAP convention. So we look forward to seeing each of you there. So I won't take any more time because I know I want Adrian to be able to have his full hour. But thank you, President Allen, and I'm looking forward to tonight's presentation as well.
Thank you so much, President Garrett. I see we have President Jackson on the line with us tonight. President Jackson, would you like to bring brief greetings?
Hello, yes, President Allen, good to see you as always. I'm Kip Jackson, President of the Parliamentary of Hudson County in New Jersey, Jersey City, and feels good to be here tonight and see you have to deal with the pressures of hosting. So sort of get the night off. So it's good to see you all. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Do we have any other officers from other units represented? I have lots of screens here, so I'm trying to scroll through and make sure I don't miss anyone. If there are, please feel free to come off mute and say good evening, bring brief greetings. Okay. Well, I am not going to delay getting to the good stuff tonight. So it's my pleasure to introduce Adrian Stratton, MBA and PRP. Mr. Stratton is a member of the National Association of Parliamentarians and AIP, the American Institute of Parliamentarians. He is an active parliamentarian of advising organizations on procedure and governance and has conducted workshops for diverse participants on fundamental issues impacting contemporary deliberative participation. His ideas on parliamentary law have been published in several journals, including the National Parliamentarian and the Parliamentary Journal. And I just have to say, he is a skilled writer. If you have read any of his articles, they are compelling. It's almost like reading fiction. It has a flow, it has an energy, and it is extremely informative. So I would just encourage you to look at those back issues and read those articles because they are really informative. Mr. Stratton currently serves as the president of the New York Association of Parliamentarians. So now with the courtesies having been extended, I'm excited to relinquish the mic to PRP Adrian Stratton.
Thank you so much for that warm introduction, President Allen. Greetings and good evening to everyone. I thank you all for joining the presentation, and I really, really hope that you get something out of it. As mentioned earlier, if you could place any questions you have in the chat, I won't be taking those real time, but we will get to all of them at the end of the presentation. If there's a drop connection or any issues, hopefully there won't be, but I do hope we can get through everything tonight and that, again, you learn something. So I will share my screen. And if you can see that, if you could give me a thumbs up, I'll get started. Perfect, I see 2 thumbs up, so that means we're good. All right, so tonight's presentation, very happy to share mastering debate and making the case. So again, a little bit about me. I am a PRP. I serve as the president of the New York Association of Parliamentarians. I'm also the general parliamentarian for Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated, and I'm a member of both NAP and AIP. As mentioned, I've written several articles. I love to get feedback on the articles. In this deck, there's actually a link to a Medium account that has all of the articles listed, so you don't have to go back through the National Parliamentarian or the Parliamentary Journal. You can check those out and please share feedback because I always want to improve and think about things from a different perspective because we're all learning together. Again, there's the Medium, adrianstratton.medium.com. And also you can reach me on the association side at president@newyorkap.org or professionally at adrian.stratton@gaacc.com. So my objectives for tonight is my hope that each participant has an expanding knowledge and understanding of parliamentary debate, and that we can explore some concepts related to debate that helps each of you improve your persuasiveness in deliberative participation. So 2 objectives, very simple concept that gets really, really deep really quick. So first, we'll talk about the basic processing of emotion. It's hard to debate or talk about parliamentary debate without talking about processing emotions. We'll go through a deep dive on understanding debate. Then we'll get into a little bit of parliamentary debate strategy. So one of my favorite topics, something that's very underutilized. And then we'll talk about what that means, all of this in a virtual context. We'll close the conversation with that. So first quote of the evening, and it would be helpful if you have your copy of Roberts with you. It's not mandatory, but I find it helpful whenever I go through a presentation just to have that. But this is actually a quote from Cannon's, which isn't Roberts, but the quote reads, "The goals of every member in a meeting should be to understand the issues, to debate freely those issues when debate is appropriate, to express their views clearly, and to make certain that their votes are counted correctly." So I really like that quote because it really sums up the reason why we all do what we do when we're in meetings. So we want to show up, we want to understand issues, we want to talk about those issues, that concept of full and free discussion. We want to express our views, whether we're for it or against it. And then at the end of all of that, we want to make certain that our votes are counted correctly. And that quote is a great entry into why we debate, because obviously we want to influence the organizations where we serve, and we want to make sure our voice is heard. And the way we do that is through debate. Another great parliamentary author, Demeter, I like his 5 great principles: order, equality, justice, right of the minority to be heard on a question, and the right of the majority to rule the organization. So we talked about the member obligations in the previous quote, and here are some principles that I think really sum up in a good way, actually in a way that's a little bit clearer to me than Roberts, what it is that underlies parliamentary law. So order. Obviously, we want a procedure that allows everyone to have fairness, but we want it to be done in an orderly way. Equality, 1 person, 1 vote. So the president has no more voting power than a new member. So everyone is equal. Justice, that's really about fairness and whether someone's for something or against something. There's a sense of justice. If something's wrong, we can appeal the chair, for instance, or we can raise a point of order. So there's justice in everything that we do. Then the right of the minority to be heard on questions, just critical component underlying parliamentary law. No matter what an individual thinks, as a member, it's their right to say it, and no one should hold that against them. Even if you're against it, it's their right as a member to express their opinion, no matter how far in the minority they are. And then ultimately, once all is said and done, so people have been recognized properly, we know that everyone's equal, they've been treated fairly, the minority has been heard, we've heard pro and con, the majority rules the organization by voting for or against. So tonight, we're really going to talk about this clash of right of the minority to be heard on a question and the right of the majority to rule the organization. So keep that in the back of your mind. In debate, we're really trying to influence, and whether you are in the minority or in the majority, it's up to you as a member to express those views and ultimately to vote on those views. So let's start at the beginning. So very, very first section of Roberts, easy to overlook for all of you advanced parliamentarians, but it says it first page, at least when we get to the sections, the member sections. And it states that, a deliberative assembly is a group of people having or assuming freedom to act in concert, meeting to determine in full and free discussion, courses of action to be taken in the name of the entire group. So once again, just really reinforcing this concept that debate isn't really optional. I think sometimes we get comfortable in organizations and we do what we do for so long or so frequently that we forget the purpose of being in a deliberative assembly is to deliberate. And when you deliberate, most times you debate. So keep that in the back of your mind the next time you go to a meeting. Are you really expressing opinions? Even if it's an opinion that you don't agree with, are you raising that minority view so that everyone, for the benefit of the entire organization, has a different perspective? So again, we meet as a group of people, we have the freedom to act in concert, going back to that order piece, we have the full and free discussion, and then the actions are taken in the name of the entire group. We do that, as I mentioned, through processing emotion. And we'll go do a quick example I know that everyone knows the rank of motions and how to process a motion, but I do think it's helpful as a reminder to go through each step, at least of processing a main motion, so we can get to the point of debate. So we know that the bottom 5 of the ranked motions all allow for debate. So you can't debate on recess, you can't debate on adjourn, you can't debate on the top ones, but those bottom 5, debate is in order. And there's a number of other motions where debate's in order, but we're going to start with a simple main motion, a main motion that many of you have probably utilized in previous organizations. So a motion to use money in a particular way. So on this particular motion, we move that we donate $1,000 to a nonprofit. Simple motion. Let's make some assumptions. So the organization is organized. They meet frequently. Quorum is met. The members are actually members, so they have the right to be there. They have the right to make motions, to debate, and to vote. And the motion is debatable. So just want to throw that out there. Whenever we're talking through scripting, it's helpful to add the assumptions. So we have our motion, and the motion is processed using these 6 steps. So it's 6 steps across 2 parts. So on the left-hand side, we have that the member makes a motion, another member seconds, and the chair states the question. On the right-hand side, we have the consideration of the motion, and that is the members debating the motion, the chair putting the question, and the chair announcing the result. So let's start with the left-hand side. So we have this motion that I move that we donate $1,000 to a nonprofit. Another member seconds, offers a second, whatever the nomenclature is, they second it. And then the chair states that it is moved and seconded that we donate $1,000 to a nonprofit. Here's how it looks in script form. Again, very basic. I move that we donate 1,000, a second, and the chair states that for everyone. We then move to consideration. Again, 6 steps across 2 parts. Consideration, we automatically jump into debate. And when we consider a motion, the members engage in careful consideration or discussion on the motion before the assembly. So here is where the deliberative assembly has a crossroads. They can either just assume that there's no debate and take the motion, or members can raise, be recognized, and clash, go back and forth, pro and con, for or against, and state their positions after being recognized on whether they're for or against the motion. So when we understand debate, the definition is that it's a contention by words or arguments, regulated discussion. Using a context for law and government, it's the formal discussion of a motion before a deliberative body according to the rules of parliamentary procedure. So on the one hand, you can look at debate as a regulated discussion, which I think fits the definition of what we do in parliamentary procedure, and also from a law and government definition, that is the formal discussion of a motion. We know that motions are recorded in our minutes. So even though debate isn't captured, the motion being made, any significant changes or amendments to that motion in the ultimate vote is a outcome of debate. Looking at Robert's Rules of Order in 12th edition 330, we know that debate is the parliamentary name given to any form of discussion of the merits of a motion. And if you utilize Mason's Manual, for all of you town council members, town clerks, we know that debate is the essential feature of a legislative body. It is the means by which the opinions of members are exchanged, proposals are deliberated, and conclusions are reached. So Mason's really goes into detail because obviously from a legislative standpoint, debate is an essential feature, but also in the nonprofit side and even in business settings, debate is essential. To understand the concept of debate, consider the intent. We talked about those 5 principles: order, justice, right of the minority, rights of the majority, fairness to all. So debate allows for all of that to take place, for exchange of ideas, for the minority to be recognized, and the majority to ultimately rule. Also in debate, we recognize the concept of full and free discussion, which is aspirational, obviously, in parliamentary procedure, but it's fundamental. We want opinions. We want people to raise ideas. We want members to really think about issues before they decide. So some factors that may impact debate. We know that speaker limits may impact debate. Obviously, we know during COVID and switching to virtual means of gathering that everyone can't talk. So if you have 300 people on the Zoom, everybody talking for 2 minutes is 600 minutes. That's a very long time. So there has to be limits, not only in number of speeches, but duration of speeches and time. We know that one factor impacting debate could be when a motion is introduced, and by whom. That's just a reality of it. If a influential past president, for instance, introduces a motion, sometimes it may have more weight than a newer member, or if someone who's always raising controversial motions raises one. Sometimes, unfortunately, that has an impact on how debate proceeds. The quorum has a large part to do with how people debate. If the culture of an organization is that it's very adversarial, that individuals attack people and not ideas, which is never a good thing, people will be less inclined to debate. And sometimes that is a dirty trick that some presiding officers will use to limit the amount of debate that happens in the organization. Because if people are fearful of debating, then no one will want to debate. Parliamentary strategy. So this is something that's definitely okay to do. So if you want a motion to pass, you should be strategic. You should rally your votes before the vote. You should be very persuasive, which is what we'll talk about a little bit later. You should figure out ways to get your point across clearly and more coherent than the other side. Parliamentary deception, never a good idea, never something that an organization should tolerate. We know that deception could be lying, introducing false information, all of those things that makes members uncomfortable, but also leads to incorrect decisions. Decisions should pass or fail based on the merits and the facts, not on lies and deception. And then confusion, whether it's unintentional or intentional. Poor presiding could lead to confusion. Members conflating different arguments could lead to confusion. And my favorite, talking about unrelated matters, things that are not germane to the motion, could lead to confusion on what it is that members are actually talking about. So think about all of these factors as you begin to debate and continue debating. So speeches, leaving off from the last point, must be germane. They must confine to the rules. Speeches that aren't related to the motion being discussed are out of order, and they're not germane in most circumstances. We know that we could also use parliamentary inquiries to question the presiding officer or obtain information. Points of order are great ways to enforce the rules. So to make sure that the chair is keeping debate in order, keeping the flow of things where they should be. Requests for information are also called points of information, can be used to direct a question through the chair. So let's say we're talking about this $1,000 that we want to donate. We can ask the chair about the current balance, for instance, or if we have any upcoming major expenses or if certain expenses have been paid. So those are all relevant ways to utilize that parliamentary tool. And then raising a question of privilege, something requiring immediate attention should be dealt with immediately. So let's get on to parliamentary debate and strategy. So first, a simple recognition that far too many people do not, at least in my opinion, yours may be different, and I would love to hear about it in the chat. But a lot of people don't really like engaging in debate, whether it's fear of public speaking, or fear of raising an unpopular point, or time in the organization. We know that sometimes newer members are treated a little less than kind in some organizations, not all. And then even friendships. If a buddy of yours raises a motion and you happen to be against that motion, would you actually, as a member of the organization with an equal right, speak against that motion? In my opinion, you should, because it should be about the idea. So it's always okay to attack ideas. It's never okay to attack people. Some other things that influence debate: factions. So boards have a tendency to gain factions or alliances. So if the board's in favor of something, it could pass. If the board's against it, it could fail, even if it's the right or wrong thing to do. Personalities and arguments all come into play. We know that relationships matter, and that should factor into your parliamentary strategy. But once again, debate is about ideas, not people. So always, always attack ideas, never attack people. It's a good way to get comfortable with debate without hurting feelings and to get your point across. And then my favorite, agenda-driven chairmanship. So chairs who really have an agenda to push, they drive that agenda and they squash debate, they really hinder it. So as a member, make sure you're protecting the assembly by raising points of order, raising appeals, ensuring that the chair helps the assembly, not hinders the assembly with regard to participation. So let's go back to that motion with all of that in mind, knowing that relationships come into play, knowing that there could be fear of public speaking, knowing that there could be a variety of reasons why someone would choose to speak for or against or not to speak at all. Let's revisit our motion. So there's many reasons to be in favor of this motion. It could be that, someone could rise and state that assisting nonprofits is aligned with the goal of the organization. Someone could raise the point in this particular organization that zero-based budgeting is the way that the organization operates. So the money needs to be spent before the end of the year. Someone could rise and state that a surplus of funds and partner nonprofits are generally in need of support. Again, a great strengthening point to use, not just, I want to donate the money, but here's the reason why we want to donate the money. And then another point, investing in nonprofits is an investment into the community. So all of those are reasons to be in favor of the motion. Those may all be reasons why you as an individual member may vote for the motion. But if you don't say it, you really rob everyone else of that value of adding to the debate. So if you look at that bottom section in yellow, those wishing that a motion be adopted must be prepared to tell the assembly how it helps members as individuals as well as an organization. And that's really a key concept, that anyone can make a motion. It doesn't make the motion good or bad, but if it's a good or a bad idea, someone should be prepared to raise their voice in debate and advocate for it or against it. The opposite is also true. So let's say we have this simple motion of donating $1,000, and there could be many reasons to rise in opposition of the motion. One could be that the organization is over budget and should save funds. Another could be that it's not clear which nonprofit will receive the money. Very good point. Another point could be that $1,000 would be better spent in other ways. So taking that $1,000 and investing it somewhere else, like the stock market. So similar to those in favor of the motion, those opposed must be prepared to tell the assembly how it harms members as well as individuals, as well as the organization. With parliamentary strategy and parliamentary debate, those who are more persuasive generally have better results. So knowing that the organization is over budget and not stating it during debate really doesn't help anyone, because everyone else may not know that the organization is over budget. If you really feel that there should be some specificity around which nonprofit receives the money, in debate, you could raise that point, and that could lead to an amendment or a changing of the motion, a withdrawal of the motion, any number of actions. But by simply participating in debate and raising your point, the organization could be better off. If you truly believe the $1,000 could be spent in better ways, you could offer those ways, or another member could offer those ways via an amendment or just through debate. So it's always a good idea, if you're thinking it, to be comfortable enough in your organization to state it. And if you're a leader in your organization, really encouraging people to participate so the best ideas can win. So in favor or opposed, members should be prepared to discuss their position, and those debating must make the case. So here's a simple framework that I found very helpful. This is not in Roberts, but it's one that I think you will find useful. A lot of debate teams use this. And if you are capturing notes, it's called ARES, Assertion, Reasoning, Evidence, and Significance, ARES. And we'll go through an example of that. So an assertion is a confident and forceful statement. So let's take our motion that I move that we donate $1,000 to a nonprofit. One could make an assertion that assisting nonprofit organizations is aligned with the goal of the organization. Very simple statement, very clear, very direct. They then can provide reason. So reasoning in this case could be the action of thinking about something in a logical or sensible way. So if we're thinking about how to use $1,000, we can use it in a number of ways. So by using an assertion and providing reasoning, It can lead us to a statement such as, our bylaws clearly state that the organization should support other charitable organizations in the community. So once again, building on those full parts to make an actual cohesive argument in debate. Next, there could be evidence. And evidence is the available body of facts or information indicating whether a belief or proposition is true or valid. So building on the previous two statements, one could offer that each year for the past 12 years, we have allocated $1,000 to a nonprofit. And as I mentioned about 4 or 5 slides ago, you got to tell individuals why it's important. How does it help them as an individual? How does it help the organization? And if you're against it, how does it harm them as an individual? And how does it harm their organization? So in this case, significance could be thought of as the quality of something being worthy of attention, something being important. So closing with, keeping with the spirit of our bylaws and custom of the organization to share, the assembly should adopt this motion. Assertion, reasoning, evidence, and significance. If you use that framework, it really helps to center your thoughts. It helps to center your arguments, and it really provides a cohesive framework so you can get your point across in a short amount of time. So let's go back to our question, this $1,000 that we have to figure out what to do with it. The question is obviously on this $1,000. The members have gone back and forth, and then the question is put to a vote. Who do you think made the best case here? And you can place this in the chat. A member who simply rises and states, we should donate $1,000 to a nonprofit because we've always done so. Or member D, the member who uses our assertion, our reasoning, our evidence, and our significance, who rises and states, assisting nonprofit organizations is aligned with the goal of the organization. Our bylaws clearly state that the organization should support other charitable organizations in the community. Each year for the past 12 years, we have allocated $1,000 to a nonprofit. Keeping in the spirit of our bylaws and the custom of our organization to share, the assembly should adopt this motion. I don't know about you, but I think member D definitely made a better argument. Member C and member D made the same argument, but member D told me the assertion. They told me the reason why they wanted to support it. They provided evidence. They talked about this past 12 years, and then they told me why it was significant. So using that framework, they took an opinion and turned it into a logical argument that was very persuasive in my opinion. So think about that assertion. How can you make a bold statement that lets individuals know what your position is? What's your reasoning for that statement? Do you have any evidence to back up that assertion and that reasoning? And then you bring it home with a conclusion that provides some significance and explains to everyone why it's important. Member C definitely gave a shorter speech. They expressed their opinion, but member D's speech is only 30 seconds. So it can be as elaborate or as short as an individual would like, but it doesn't take a lot more time to go through those individual steps to provide a really robust argument. The same is true for arguing against this motion. So we have our $1,000. The motion has been made, it's been seconded. The members debated after the question has been stated. Member E could simply state, we should not donate $1,000 to a nonprofit because we don't have the money, in my opinion. Again, a very true statement, a very short statement. Or a member could rise, like member F, and state the organization is over budget and should save funds. Our bylaws state that we should support charitable organizations, not that we must, and we can support in non-monetary ways. We can only give what we have when we are over budget by $2,000. Vote no on this motion to save our budget and let's donate our collective time instead. So once again, member E, member F making the same arguments in theory against the motion. So the motion is to donate $1,000. Member E simply provides an opinion. We should not donate $1,000 in their opinion. And then member F takes us through those 4 steps: assertion, reasoning, evidence, and significance. So the assertion being the organization is over budget, we should save funds. The reason is the bylaws state that we should support charitable organizations, not that we must. The evidence being we can only give what we have, and we are over budget by $2,000. And then making it significant, making it important for the individual and the organization Vote no on this motion to save our budget and let's donate our collective time instead. So in that argument, actually providing an alternative so that members feel confident that there's an alternative solution to the motion at hand. So 2 examples, for and against. Members may vote for, members may vote against, but at the conclusion of that robust debate, the chair will announce the result. And here's how that looks in script form. So everything we talked about is collapsed into debate. The chair then states, are you ready for the question? The question is on the motion that we donate $1,000 to a nonprofit. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes or noes have it, and the motion is adopted or lost. We will or will not donate $1,000 to a nonprofit. That debate piece is critical. When you think about the entire script, that clash of should we do it, shouldn't we do it? Here's my reasoning, here's my evidence. All of that happens in that one moment of members debating. I would encourage everyone to utilize this parliamentary tool to really think about how you can increase your participation in debate, because I do think it's a skill that can get better over time. And the more we use it and practice it, the better off we become. So in conclusion, a few virtual considerations, and then we'll open it up for questions. Things have obviously changed due to COVID, and it probably won't go back to being completely in person anytime soon. At least for the clients that I serve, they're really preparing for a time where in-person is optional, but there's always a virtual component. The parliamentary debate definitely is impacted by virtual considerations. In Robert's Rules of Order, 12th edition, 936, they talk about the need to allocate provisions to indicate whether a member who is present or not should have the right to participate by electronic means, or whether the body may choose to allow or disallow such participation. This is a huge cause of confusion and concern for the rights of members that we all should look carefully at in our profession. For instance, if we have 10 people in a meeting and 5 are online and 5 are in a room, and only the 5 who are actually in the room together are being recognized, we're disenfranchising members. So we have to put in our bylaws or our standing rules mechanisms to understand how members get recognized so that no one's not overlooked, either intentionally or unintentionally. Using the chat is definitely an efficient way to recognize people or to look at questions or concerns. But as we all know, sometimes the chat can get very busy. It can get filled with things that aren't quite germane or related to anything that's going on in the meeting. So without spelling out clear rules, organizations can quickly find themselves in trouble with voting, with nominations, with elections, a whole host of things. And that's for the smaller meetings. For conventions and larger meetings, this really needs to be thought out. The great thing is we've gone through enough of these now where we really can start to figure out in each of our organizations what's appropriate, what isn't appropriate, what we like, what we don't like. And just by thinking about the rules, we can limit the amount of people who are disenfranchised. The quote here, when there is no law, but every man does what is right in his own eyes, there is the least of real liberty. And that's from Henry Robert. Thinking about that order, that equality, that justice, the right of the minority to be heard on a question, and the right of the majority to rule on a question, all of these points touch at the heart of why we need to debate. And all of those points are magnified when we have different people on different types of technologies. It could be that the chair simply overlooked someone or isn't comfortable with technology, or had a computer issue and now they're using their phone so they can't see the chat. Definitely don't take anything for granted. Definitely think through each of these processes as you develop your standing rules and you augment your bylaws or amend them, because virtual considerations aren't really nice to have, they're a need to have. And in the context of parliamentary debate, a lot of concern in the parliamentary spaces around how members get recognized, how questions are taken, and whether using or augmenting written communications in debate is actually a breach of parliamentary rules. So, are members in the room? face-to-face. That's definitely one way to manage your meetings, and a way that I hope we get back to very soon. But chances are that form of meeting will be less and less. Complete virtual participation, so everyone dialing in from a separate device or a separate computer, is definitely something that's more and more common. That requires a different thought process when we look at how to manage not only debate, but recognition of members, recognition for points of order, for instance, or appeals, needs to be thought through if everyone's on the same technology or not. It gets very tricky with partial virtual participation. So when we have groups of people together and groups of people who are separate, so that needs to be thought through. And then the mix of technology. So we have some people on video, some people just dialing in via phone, and some people in person. All of those types of meeting require a different approach and different rules, at least in my opinion, on how meetings should be managed. Robert's Rules of Order 934, it's important to understand that regardless of the technology, the opportunity for simultaneous oral communication is essential to the deliberative character of the meeting. Therefore, a group that attempts to conduct deliberative process in writing, which is not recommended, does not constitute a deliberative assembly. Any such effort may achieve a consultative character, but is foreign to the deliberative process as understood under parliamentary law. So if you ever get pushback on why can't we just type it in the chat, or why can't we just, email it out or do an e-vote, point to this and really think through the intent of why members actually need to be heard in meetings and when we deliberate. And 934 is the start of the conversation. It's obviously not the end all to be all. Every organization has to decide the right mix of technology and the balance of that. But 934 is a good starting point. So I thank you. I believe my time is drawing to an end. We definitely want to leave time for questions. Please, I would love your feedback. I hope this has been helpful, but definitely reach out, take a look at the articles. And if I can help you at all, please let me know. This presentation will be shared in the recap, I believe. So for recap and further study, I won't read through all of these, but this is really all of the relevant sections that I looked at when thinking through this particular topic, minus the assertion, reasoning, evidence, and significance. That's something that's not in Roberts, but everything you need to understand debate, at least in the current edition of Robert's Rules of Order newly revised, you can find there. So I will stop sharing.
Thank you.
Open it up for questions.
Wonderful. Thank you, PRP Stratton. I know everyone is just, kind of full of new information. I think the first time I saw you present on that framework, I was like, there was sparks coming out of my ears, like, oh my gosh, that is magic, right? Like, so we get into these conversations in other organizations and the debate just circles, and, all those issues that you listed for, things that can impact debate that have absolutely nothing to do really with the merit of the question. And so thank you so much for sharing that. I am going to turn it over to our chairman of our Professional Development and Education Committee, Raymona Jones, to facilitate the Q&A.
Good evening. Thank you for such a great presentation. We do have a few questions which were provided in the chat. The question was, you used the phrase attack ideas. Could that be interpreted as antagonistic, even if it's about the idea, not the person?
Absolutely, but I think that's one of those cultural things where you want to create an environment where if I state something and it's a bad idea, that someone can argue against that and I don't take it personal. Every organization isn't there yet. I know most of the organizations I'm in, we're not there yet, but I'm hopeful by talking through the benefits of looking at just the ideas and not the person, we can get to that point. But I do recognize that this time, a lot of organizations, some people can't separate the two.
Okay, great. And then the next few comments were more like aha moments. Debate is about ideas, not people. And also there was a comment about, we find that more people will speak for a motion and not have the courage to speak against it. Some don't want to second a motion because of the perception that they are in favor.
Absolutely, absolutely. So that's where the parliamentary strategy comes into play. When I led my fraternity chapter, I'm an Alpha, and I was president of a chapter here in the city, I would automatically have my vice president second everything. That way, no one could say that a motion died. It was never discussed, and whether someone voted for or against it, at least, it didn't die. But yeah, when a motion dies because lack of a second, that, unless it's just a really bad motion and you can use postpone indefinitely or object to consideration of the question, it's really, something's missing there. And you should talk to your members about why people are afraid to second motions.
Okay. Great. And I think that was the next comment, was that we need to just encourage people that the second motion doesn't mean that you're in favor or opposed. You just want to see the vote advance.
Yeah.
Okay.
And if I could add to
right.
that, one bad habit, I shouldn't call it a bad habit. One habit I've observed that lends to that is people who record minutes and they list who second the motion in the minutes. And I think sometimes that fear of being a bad motion and their name being attached to a second could stop some people. So if you do that in your organization, whilst you're right to do it, I do think there's not a need to place a seconder, and that could actually discourage people from seconding because now their name is forever attached to their motion.
Good point. So we have, so evidence, then this is a question in reference to evidence. So evidence should be measurable.
Absolutely.
Are we saying that evidence?
Absolutely.
Now, and if what?
No, please.
So the next question is, what if we don't have enough facts or evidence to measure as a part of the debate?
Well, again, we don't want parliamentary deception. So I would never advocate that someone intentionally or unintentionally be deceptive and, give half truths or half facts. So if you don't have the evidence, you can skip it. But I do think there's always facts. You can just be creative about what those facts are and what the evidence is. Normally around money, you have at least a budget or an idea of what's going on, so you can add it there. If it's on an individual, you can talk about accolades and past things that they've done. Let's say there's a motion to give someone a plaque or a recognition. So there's creative ways to find evidence if you look for it, but you should never falsify evidence or make up things to get your point across, because that's not really fair.
Great. And then the next question we have is, when does the chair ask, are you ready for a question?
So the chair asks, are you ready for the question? In some organizations, simply state, are you ready for a debate? But the way using Roberts is, are you ready for the question? So that starts debate, and that is the fourth step. So if someone makes a motion, someone seconds, the chair then states what the question is so that everyone is clear on what it is that they're going to be discussing or voting on. And then that, are you ready for the question, is an introduction for debate. I like using that phrasing versus if there's any debate, because if everyone's ready for the question, let's say the motion is to give everybody in the meeting $1,000. I don't think we need to discuss that. Like, everybody's ready for the question, so let's vote to give everybody $1,000. But if it's something where members want to talk about it, that's where, we're not ready for the question. We want to debate it. So I would encourage everyone to use that phrasing. But, your organization has been around for as long as some of ours, and the custom is to say, are you ready for debate? There's no need to point out that technicality. That's perfectly fine.
That's good. The next question is around the voting. If multiple devices are logged on by individuals, does voting software prevent unethical behavior like submitting multiple votes by individuals?
Yeah, that's a tough one. It depends. I like Election Buddy and Election Runner because it is tied to an email address. So while one could vote from multiple email addresses, it would be impossible to vote from the same email address. When we use Zoom poll, for instance, someone could be in multiple devices and that vote will register multiple times. So I wouldn't recommend that as a way to actually take a vote. Either do a voice vote or a type I in the chat, which is a formal roll call. or use a third-party software, because using Teams or using Google Hangout or Zoom, those polling features, you'll have double or triple votes. But if you use a third party, it's tied to an actual username, like an email, you eliminate that.
Great. I
Chairman
believe we
Jones?
captured all the, yes.
I'm sorry. President Jackson has his hand up. If you could give him an opportunity as well, please.
Only if he asks the easy,
Yes.
no hard questions.
You
You're
have
on
to
mute.
unmute yourself.
Now you have to say everything exactly all over again. Great presentation, Mr. Stratton.
Thank you.
Two issues that I've had, especially since COVID and we moved into the virtual space. One has been, in a regular physical meeting, either your quorum is there or it is not. Either they're sitting in front of you or they're not. One question I had was in the virtual space, yes, they can log on and then they shut off their camera, they shut off their mic. Now they can be sitting there paying attention to the meeting, or they could be watching the game. So how would you, that's always been kind of a sensitive area for me. I don't know how you would assess that. My second question is, and I think you mentioned it earlier, is as far as being recognized and recognizing your members in this virtual space, because sometimes you may not always see them. If you have 20, 30 guys on and then you only see 10 or 12, and then everybody's kind of coming at you and you're trying to, I find that to be difficult. So I just wanted to get your advice.
Sure. So your first question is a very difficult one. It has an easy answer, but it's difficult from a management standpoint. We know that regardless of who's logged on, that is present in voting. So think about it. If you're at your convention or your conclave and, let's say there's 500 people in the meeting hall and 200 people walk into the hallway, those 200 people in the hall are not in the meeting. They're registered, they're at the conclave, but they're not there. And that's the way I think about it in a virtual sense. So as chair, you could always do a poll of everybody in the meeting, select yes to this answer, or everybody type your name in the chat before a vote's taken. Yeah, individuals could come back into the meeting, but individuals could also go into the hall of your convention and say, hey, we're about to vote, come back in. So for me, I draw a hard line as present in voting. If you're not present, you shouldn't be voting. That also comes into play with elections. So if you are voting on a candidate and it's election buddy and it goes out to everyone's email, and let's say you have 50 people in the chapter, but there's only 20 people at the meeting, then only those 20 should be getting the ballot. And that's where 934 comes into play. Each organization has to work out those rules. At least in the organizations that I serve professionally, we work out the details of verifying the vote before the vote. So there might be 60 people logged on, but we have ways to check to make sure that if there's 20 people who are actually in the virtual meeting, that only 20 people are voting. If there's 25 votes, then we have an issue. On your second question on recognition, it's the same thing. Some organizations are very just relaxed and chill, and if you have a question, come off mute or raise your hand or type it in the chat. Some organizations, they have a rigorous process where there's effectively like a digital sergeant in arms, and that person, like going to the mic at a convention, gets you the recognition. So you tee up your question to that individual, and then that individual goes, okay, we have 5 to recognize. The mute police, yeah. Again, it's every organization. I think to answer your question on the second part of how you manage that, it's really about how formal your organization wants to be. If you have like 5 or 6 people, people can come off mute and the chair can kind of figure out who goes after what. But if you have anything over 15 people regularly at a meeting, you should work out a fair process so that there's an orderly way. It's not the loudest person or the person who's always coming off mute first before the chair is done. And every organization has their own flavor that they like to use. And yes,
Thank you.
customers are definitely stronger than the parliamentary authority, for sure. Not always right, but bad habits are just as hard to break as good ones. So we should be developing good habits.
Great. I believe that's all the questions that are in the chat. Any other questions? You can raise your hand to be recognized.
I'm sorry.
Do you have any best practices you want to highlight in reference to hybrid meetings?
So in hybrid meetings, my best advice would be to ensure that someone other than the chair and the vice president and the parliamentarian are managing the virtual engagement. Some organizations have started to elect someone or at least appoint someone like a chair of technology to manage all things technology. But if one is presiding or one is serving as a parliamentarian or one, the vice president should be prepared to preside if the president drops the call, what have you. You really just need someone dedicated to that. Now, in societies that, are membership based and secret, that means that one member's kind of given up their right to participate because they're focused on the technical piece. But in open societies, it's very easy to hire somebody, hire an intern, someone, get a college kid. It's ways to have someone just watching to make sure from a technical standpoint, people are getting into the room, people who aren't in the room are exiting, people who are speaking who shouldn't be are muted. It just gets tricky when we have closed membership meetings in various organizations, because that means someone has to relinquish their right as a member to perform that role. So it would be my advice, just have one person dedicated. And if you're in a society where it's closed, maybe that rotates. So, it's not the same person every meeting. You take volunteers, and if someone doesn't want to volunteer, and someone just gets selected.
Great.
Mr. Stratton, I have a question.
I knew someone was going to say that. My favorite word, voluntold. Voluntold all the time.
So thank you so much, Chairman Jones. We are going to move to close out this evening's session. I'm sure everybody is now saying to themselves, okay, she did not make false claims here. This was a great presentation. So I just want to say thank you so much to PRP Stratton. I would ask him if he would put his preferred email address in the chat, just so that folks, I know it's in your deck, PRP Stratton, but it's going to be a couple days before we send that out. So if you wouldn't mind putting your email address in the chat, so folks can send you a quick note to let you know how they felt about this. I know you were always seeking feedback. I think once I put in our group me an experience that I'd had, and his question was, well, how do you think you should have handled that? So there's always a teachable moment, which I really appreciate. Again, excellent presentation. We are also going to drop a link, and it may already have been dropped into the chat, for the session evaluation. That's going to be helpful to us as we continue to put on these workshops for you. We will share that feedback with PRP Stratton, because again, he's always asking for feedback. The other thing I'll mention is that one of our goals is to launch our Young Parliamentarians Initiative, and that's something that we're working on. If you are moved to want to support that, we will put the link to that to our PayPal page in the chat as well. And we are looking to start to support young people to do this work with PRP Stratton as the goal, right? One day they could be able to present a compelling message like that. So again, thank you for that. The last thing I want to say is we are really excited about next month's learning opportunity. It is going to be Parliamentary Game Night. So if you're here with us tonight and that sounds interesting to you, please keep a lookout for that. There will be a nominal charge. I think it's going to be $5 or $10, because it is going to also benefit our Young Parliamentarians Initiative, but it's going to be fun. It's going to be engaging. You can win prizes. So you will get your investment back if you do decide to join us. So thank you again, PRP Stratton. Very grateful for you taking the time to spend with us this evening. Thank you to everyone who came out. The parliamentarians of Bucks County will be meeting in 5 minutes. So you've got 5 minutes to take a breath, step away, and then we'll come back for our unit meeting. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much. Take care.
Okay, bye-bye. And I'm sorry, I should say to our unit members, there's a different link. So check your agenda for the link. And I see someone has a question about how you get credit. Dr. Nottingham, if you put your email address in the chat, along with your credential, you will get a CEU unit if you are a credentialed member. If you're not a credentialed member and you just want something that says that you were here, let us know that so that we know what to do. Okay. So thank you, everyone. I will see the parliamentarians of Bucks County members on the other link in 5 minutes.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
So you're just giving him a minute.
Yeah, and did you stop the recording?
Oh, that would help.